Greetings. Welcome to all attendees. Welcome to our panelists. Welcome to our speaker. Welcome to this instance of the Stanford Department of Medicine's Where Science Meets Communications speaker series. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Katie Kanagawa, Director of Communications in Stanford's Department of Medicine, and I have the tremendous honor of introducing our esteemed speaker today, Dr. Maya Adam. As the Director of Health Media Innovation and a Clinical Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics at Stanford School of Medicine, Dr. Adam is at the forefront of transforming global health communication through innovative video-based approaches. Her impactful research measures the effectiveness of entertainment education in promoting health awareness, particularly in maternal and child health, nutrition, mental health, and disease prevention. Dr. Adam not only produces engaging animated films and online courses, but also plays a pivotal role in developing educational content for Stanford School of Medicine's programs, touching the lives of countless learners. As a faculty lead for the Global Child Health Media Initiative and Associate Director of the Center for Digital Health at Stanford in the Department of Medicine as well, she champions the integration of digital health strategies in promoting well-being. With a commitment to fostering global health, her online courses have reached over 1 million learners worldwide, showcasing her dedication to education beyond borders. Dr. Adams' groundbreaking research includes principal investigator roles in randomized controlled trials that investigate the effects of digital health education interventions conducted in collaboration with the esteemed Heidelberg Institute of Global Health. Additionally, she is a faculty fellow at the Center for Innovation and Global Health. Safe to say she wears a lot of hats. So I personally had the pleasure of seeing Dr. Adam in action as she delivered a presentation at the 2024 AAMC Conference for Institutional Advancement in Boston, and I can tell you, you're in for a treat. So we invite everyone to submit your questions using the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. And we will get to as many of those questions as time will allow in the Q&A portion of the event. So please do use that Q&A feature. And then with that, I think I'll go ahead and pass the Zoom mic to Dr. Maya Adam.
Katie, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. I hope that a lot of what you said was true. There was a lot there. I'm going to just share my screen with all of you. Welcome, everybody. I'm honored that you would spend your lunch hour with me talking about storytelling for science communication. And I'm so grateful to you for inviting me, Katie and team. It's a real honor. Because it's lunchtime, I thought that we would start with a little menu. So this is your menu for our lunch together. We're going to just talk a little bit about how I got here to be doing this work. Then I'd love to introduce you to the idea of global health media innovation, which is what I spend most of my days working on. I'd love to talk to you about storytelling for science communication and storytelling as a science, because it really is, surprisingly. I'd also love to just introduce you to this concept of innovation for meaning, which I first learned about a few years ago, and it has since shaped the way I think about a lot of the decisions that I make in my work. And then I'll tell you quickly how we evaluate the media that we create to make sure that it's working. And then I'll show you some samples, if that's okay. And then we can have some Q&A. So if that sounds like a good menu for you for today, I will just dive right in, and I'm going to try and make sure to leave time for questions. So I've set a timer for myself. Okay, by way of introduction, there are basically two parts of my background that I want to tell you about because they both really informed the work that I'm doing today. The first is that my parents met in South Africa during the apartheid era. My mother is an Indian South African person originally, and my father was at the time a German PhD student who had traveled to South Africa to study this system of institutionalized racial domination, which really, at that moment in history, there was nothing like that in the world. And he was studying how this had happened and ways to dismantle it. And that actually became both of their life work. But first, let me tell you this part of the story. When they met, it was illegal for them to eat in the same restaurant, to be in the same car together, or sit on the same park bench, or even walk on the same beach. It was illegal. They could have been arrested for that. And yet they decided to, in secret, have this very intense relationship. They fell in love. They would meet secretly in my mom's parents' basement. I don't know what my mother's, Indian parents in South Africa thought about this German PhD student that kept coming to visit, but they basically didn't like the fact that the laws of the government at the time said that those two could not have a relationship. So they helped her to break those rules. And after about 3 months, they were found out by the secret police and they were kicked out of South Africa. And they had to go to Canada, where at the time, Canada was relatively empty. They were sort of accepting anybody who had a pulse. And my parents qualified and they moved to Canada, where they had us and started a family and started their careers in political science. By the time we were teenagers, we had Canadian citizenship. So we were allowed to go back to South Africa as foreigners. And I did a lot of my high schooling in South Africa. And what stuck with me from those years was seeing firsthand what you sort of start to see in the picture that I put on the slide here. And it was the absolute discrepancies in health that emerge when you have a whole group of the population who don't get access to quality health information and to other resources, healthcare, education, basic human rights, and other resources that help us to live healthy and fulfilled lives. And I remember going into the townships with a friend of my parents who was a physician and seeing firsthand how devastating it was for communities that were left behind, that communities that did not receive access to credible health information. And that stuck with me. At the same time, I was a teenager, and to my mother's intense frustration, my career goal at the time was to become a professional ballet dancer. She had moved across the world to have a free life and give her children all access to their, best potential opportunities. And yet she was left with a daughter who said, "My dream is to become a dancer." But they let me do it, and I ended up spending 10 years in the former East Germany as a professional ballet dancer before I went back to study medicine and to do an undergraduate degree in that order. I mean, undergraduate degree and then medicine. But I'll tell you what I took from that career. Even no matter how technically brilliant the dancers were that I worked with, it was the ones who had both technical brilliance and heart, the ones that could tell a story to the audience. Those were the ones that delivered unforgettable performances. Those were the dancers who were able to keep the audience at the edge of their seats. And so it really reinforced to me that technical expertise is not enough by itself. And in the same way, scientific evidence often fails to engage audiences if it doesn't have some degree of human application. And for that human application piece, I think storytelling is one of the most powerful approaches that we have at our fingertips. Okay, so fast forward, it was 2020. I had been on the faculty of Stanford Medicine for a few years. I was doing some work, experimental work with online learning. Some of you who are in the audience today are in my online courses. Thank you so much for showing up today. And I remember in 2020, being approached by some of the people who were trying to get health messages out to the public. Remember, there was all that nonsense on social media, opinion-based medical advice that was actually some of it quite dangerous. And the challenge that was posed to me was, can we use engaging media, storytelling, soundtracks, beautiful visuals to engage audiences around the world and convey health information about what was going on during the COVID pandemic? And so that left me with this really difficult but also fascinating challenge. How could we reach learners who spoke different languages, looked different from one another, lived in totally different cultural settings, and even had differing levels of education and literacy? How could we reach all of those populations with single messages that didn't need to be translated, that didn't need to be sent only to specific groups? And that was the beginning of the Global Health Media Innovation Lab, which is the lab that I now lead, where we develop and test innovative solutions to those kinds of problems. So I want to show you one sample, because I've talked long enough for this segment, of how we tried to approach the challenge during COVID of creating evidence-based health messages that could go global without the need for translation or any kind of adaptation. Okay, so as you can see from that super simple, almost completely wordless short animation, what we were trying to do there was to basically create health messages that were rapidly scalable, that were accessible, meaning that anybody, anywhere, or almost anybody, almost anywhere could understand them, and that were engaging, that somehow made you smile or made you feel some emotion so that you would say, oh, that was clever. I'm going to forward that to everybody I know. And in that way, we were able to reach in some instances, several million people with those very short, very inexpensive messages. Um, what I'd like to suggest to you today is that what we're doing with this approach is actually combining the oldest form of communication in the book, which is storytelling, with the newest form of communication, which is social media, online rapid communication. I'm sure that things are going to start to move even more quickly now with all of the innovations in digital technology that are emerging. But if we can sometimes look back and say, how did people historically communicate and teach things? And then we can marry that with something that we have access to today, like a novel method of disseminating media like social media. Sometimes we can come up with really innovative solutions. So the approach that we ended up developing and testing is called short animated storytelling, or SAS for short. And basically, our research focuses on disseminating and testing these innovative short format films. And their goal is to overcome barriers, language barriers, literacy and education barriers, and to remain accessible across cultures. So let me just go over the three aspects. They're short because short media can scale quickly. They're animated because animation lets us use a fish as the main character or lets us use a minion as the main character. And those are culturally accessible to more people than if we put a human being in front of a camera, which sometimes limits the sort of scalability of that media because people look at that presenter and if they don't feel that they can relate, then they might feel the message isn't for them. Okay, so we talked about short, we talked about animated, and we talked about storytelling being a near universally appealing way of communicating. But did you know that there is a science to storytelling? This blew my mind when I took my very first screenwriting course, which I took in 2020 when we all thought there was a possibility that we might actually, die of COVID. And we asked ourselves, have I learned everything that I wanted to learn in this lifetime? And my answer was, I always wanted to actually learn how to write screenplays. Maybe I should take an online screenwriting course. And what I learned was fascinating. Stories have a science behind them. I had always thought that when we watch movies or series, some brilliant person just had this inspiration and, created this beautiful narrative out of nowhere. And it captivates us, and we flock to it every night. And we go to our favorite series or we watch our favorite movies because there's some magic there. But actually, what I learned is that there is a structure to stories. And I have to give you one spoiler alert right now. After I explain this to you, you'll never be able to watch your favorite series or your favorite movie again without sort of analyzing it. So I'm really sorry in advance for ruining your entertainment experience for the rest of your life. If you want to mute for the next few minutes, please go ahead. But basically, I think you'll agree with me when I tell you, think about your favorite film. Okay, not every, but most films tend to follow more or less a three-act story structure. They start out with a setup in which we meet the main character. Usually there's something wrong in that main character's life. Something's not right. They're not completely happy. And that gives us a motivation for a story because a story at the end of the day is about character change. It's about a character arc, right? So if the character's life was perfect, there would be no need for the story, or it would be a really boring one. So in the setup, we get to see who this main character hit is, or who the main characters are, and what it is that they're missing or that's wrong in their lives. Then something happens, an inciting event, and that is something that basically prevents that character from being able to continue on along the path that they were on in the setup. Something happens like they receive a terrible diagnosis, or their spouse leaves them, or they learn something about their family history that makes it impossible for them to continue on the trajectory they were on. That leads then to the rising action. Sometimes we call it the fun and games, where the main character tries to solve the problem that they have in the wrong way. And often it's funny, it's fun. We like seeing our main character try to solve this problem. And we're actually rooting for them to be able to solve their problem in the wrong way. Think about Aladdin. You know how Aladdin, with the genie's help, fakes being a prince and goes to meet Princess Jasmine as this fake prince, and she buys it and she falls in love with him. And you're like, we're at the midpoint and we're like, yes, he did it. I, for one, sometimes feel like, why can't a movie just stop in the midpoint? But of course, it can't stop because the main character has not learned the lesson that they were supposed to learn. to complete their character arc. So what happens then is there's this falling part where everything starts to fall apart and the character ends up in the dark night of the soul. Sometimes it's also called the down on your knees moment. And at that moment, they're worse off than they were at the beginning. And they're even worse off than they were when the inciting event happened. They've lost everything. They've lost their friends. They've lost their ability to try and solve things the wrong way. They're really at their lowest. And something happens either through their own realization or another character helps them to realize something important that they were meant to learn. And that leads to this resolution phase and then a new normal, often accompanied by a high tower surprise, which is some kind of unexpected twist. And this story structure applies even when you see a commercial for like cleaning liquid. You'll see the setup. There's a pile of terrible dishes, and the person cleaning them is exhausted. There's an inciting event. Maybe somebody comes and places the last plate with dirty, food on top of the pile, and the pile of dishes tumble into the dishwater. Something happens. Then there's the tired person trying the wrong way to clean those dishes until finally they're just exhausted. I mean, this is like Dark Night of the Soul seems extreme when we're talking about a commercial, but basically what I'm saying is you can apply this structure to any kind of narrative, even if it's a short one. And of course, in when speaking about like an ad or a commercial, the new normal is that they found the solution to their cleaning problems, and it's that spray that cuts through all the grease, and that's how they can live on. And then the high tower surprise will be like the dog will run through with muddy paws and make a mess of the countertop or something like that. Okay, now that I have ruined your experience of watching films and series, I'm so sorry about that. I would like to show you a short video. And in this video, your task is to try and find for me the dark night of the soul or the down on your knees moment when the main character is at their lowest. And then bonus points if you can also see the inciting event, the thing that kicks off the rising action. And maybe if you're really good, you can see the twist or the high tower surprise or the thing that you go, oh, that was funny at the end. Okay? Okay, so I think what you might have seen if you were trying to find those three story beats that I mentioned, you might have seen that the down on your knees moment or the dark night of the soul was when the main character collapses face forward on the ground. The inciting event was that first text message coming through, and the Hightower surprise or the thing that you say, oh, that was a little unexpected, was when the dog pats the human at the end. Did some of you get that? If you did, you can send a little thumbs up and we can see how many of you got at least one of those three beats. Okay, so this concept of innovation for new meaning is something that I learned by reading a book called Overcrowded, written by an Italian innovator called Roberto Verganti. Basically, there are two ways of thinking about innovation or changing the norm, right? One is design thinking. Almost all of us are familiar with that. It's when we kind of have a problem that we're trying to solve. We take input from everybody, ideas, suggestions. Those suggestions are applied towards the problem. They're consolidated into a solution, and that solution affects whatever the norm is. And that's a powerful way of innovating. It can also be an overcrowded process, and it requires a defined problem to be present. Innovation for meaning, on the other hand, it's the sort of opposite in that it's innovation from the inside out. It starts with an inspiration about how we can use an existing thing in our lives in a different way. And I'll give you a super simple example. Candles, right? Candles were first invented because we didn't have electricity and they were there to make light. But we still use candles today, although we have electricity in most parts of the world. So why is that? It's because somebody looked at the candle and said, what else? How else can we make this an indispensable part of our lives? And so somebody said, well, what if we used it to add scent to a room or to add atmosphere to a room? What if we made it part of our yoga practice and we used it to really, establish a sense of calm and wellness? So sometimes candles now are used for a totally different meaning than they were initially. It's the same with cell phones, right? If you think of the phone, we used to just use it to make calls. And now we use our phone for navigation, for communication with friends, for entertainment, so many things that we use our phone for. That was sort of innovation for new meaning. So I think what we're doing with short animated storytelling is we're taking an existing solution or an existing thing in our lives, which is short, entertaining media, and we're using it for something else, which is science communication. Okay, I want to show you one more example. I mentioned to you using a fish as the main character, and we decided to do that when I was given the challenge a couple of years ago to create a video that would reduce stigma towards people with addiction. It was meant to be part of our mental health series for the Stanford School of Medicine. And I remember thinking, wow, this is going to be hard. How do you create an animated film that can reduce stigma towards people with addiction? It was a challenge, and it took us several weeks to come up with a really good story. And I'm going to show that to you, and then I'll tell you about the study we did to evaluate whether that was effective or not. So that video, we wanted to really see whether using a character like a fish and a narrative that we hoped would be accessible to many different communities in many different parts of the world. So what we did was we tested that video in a large-scale online randomized controlled trial. We've done similar trials with our other short media, and basically what we do here is we recruit people, often from many different regions of the world. In this case, we recruited people from the US, from the UK, and from South Africa. And we recruited 13,500 people in all, and randomized them to get either the whole video that you just saw, the same video without sound, because we wanted to see how much the soundtrack um, contributed to the effect of the video, and then a control group that got information. They read information about addiction. So we wanted to see what the effect was on stigma reduction, stigma towards people with addiction. I can't tell you the results because that manuscript is actually in review right now, but it will be coming out soon, and this is, in general, the way in which we test our interventions to learn more about what works and what we can do better. And the lovely thing about these trials is that because they are online, we can conduct them relatively quickly and get the findings out. We can get them disseminated more quickly often than traditional randomized control trials. So that's been a benefit for us because we can then use the findings to inform our next projects. Okay, speaking of next projects, I have two more to show you. I hope you're not exhausted, and then we can chat. So the next video I want to show you, I'm laughing a bit because sometimes we push the boundaries a little bit too far. And this one we created with teenagers at a high school, a local high school, and we talked, the premise of this was how can we raise awareness in teenagers and young adults about the dangers of spending too much time on your devices, on your smartphones? How can we raise awareness about phone addiction? And of course, these high schoolers had crazy ideas, and some of them were just crazy enough for me to think this was a good idea. We may have gone a bit too far, has not been released yet, so take it with a pinch of salt. But let me know afterwards if you think this was potentially an effective way. And by the way, we are in the middle of a trial now to test this one with 6,000 young adults in the US to see if it actually raises awareness about the dangers of screen addiction. So here we go. Okay, we'll stop there for that one. Um, we we had a lot of fun making that. I have to say, I love my job. I get to have so much fun and do science at the same time, which is really amazing. And I highly recommend it if anybody wants to get into this field. But okay, so that video we're in the midst of testing right now. I will hopefully be publishing the findings of that within the next 3 or 4 months after we analyze the data. And then the last video I want to show you before we take time for questions, it's a video that is something I've never done before. We were approached by the German National Cancer Research Center to create a video, to co-create a video with them that would boost uptake of colonoscopies in people 50 years and older for whom colonoscopy was the recommended cancer screening procedure. Um, when I first had that call, I was like, wow, I don't know if we can do that with animation. And in fact, after I had created the animation that I'll show you in a minute, I called a friend of mine who runs an animation house in South Africa, and I told him we recently made an animated film to promote colonoscopies in adults over the age of 50. And he just said to me, I don't even want to see it. Like, don't show me. Because he just could not imagine how we would do that in a way that was tasteful and not too graphic and somehow acceptable to go out on social media. Again, this one has not been released yet. We are planning trials in both Germany and the US to make sure it's effective before it gets launched. So this is very much a prototype, but I'm happy to share it with you, just to sort of see that sometimes one of the things I end up doing when I have a problem like this is I think about the benefits of animation. Like animation allows us to do things you could never do with human actors. And that's sometimes the rationale for using it. So in this case, we thought, what if we were to make this short PSA about colonoscopies and we were to tell the story from the perspective of a polyp inside the colon? Okay, so enough said. I will show you the video now. Here he is.
Oh, hello, little fellow. I didn't notice you'd popped up.
Wow. Are you cancer?
Haha, not yet, my little friend. But one day, if we both hang on long enough, we too can become...
What was that?
Oh, no, not again. Hold on. Fiber. It's the bane of our existence. Good grief. He must be eating vegetables again.
Must have been a lot of vegetables.
No, it can't be. This happened once before, when I was about your size. But why would he get another?
Hello? Is anybody there?
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Katie, if you have questions.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation. I want to make sure that you get a chance to catch up on the incredible, very, very lively, very loving, very like seriously positive chat. Thank you, everyone who has like been adding your notes to the chat. This is a truly international, global audience, which I think speaks to the success of your efforts and global digital communication, Dr. Adam, and also for like I think what a lot of people here are pointing to is the impact, the incredible impacts of those videos. And I have the feeling I can speak for many of us when I say I could seriously watch your videos all day long
Oh, thank
and
you.
just like watch them over and over, and there's something really truly therapeutic, enlightening and just downright like entertaining, I think, about those videos. I just love them. And I know all of us just want to, I think express our appreciation for the work you do and our hope that you'll just continue to do it and send those products our way, because they infuse our lives with joy, insight, and your special energy. So just
Oh,
wanted to,
thank you
that's
so much,
really
Katie.
clear from the chat. We will share the chat with you so you can have a chance to go through it all. But yes, we will turn to questions now. We do have a good number coming through. We have some to get started here. We're basically just kind of looking through the questions that were submitted through the Q&A and also in the chat. I have my co-hosts here going through the questions and sending those to me. So I think the one that we can start with is, okay, this is a good question. Is what metrics do you use to evaluate whether a health media piece actually changed behavior? Not just
Excellent.
engagement or views, but real clinical impact. That's a good
Excellent question. And the answer is it depends. For each video, it's a little different. And for each video, because even though the videos are micro interventions, they're very small, they're 2 minutes or sometimes even 1 minute long, we still want to rigorously test them. So we often use validated, whenever we can, we use validated measures of our primary and secondary outcomes. And by outcomes, I mean like the results, the thing we're trying to move the needle on or change. And so, for example, with the video with the fish, right? The main outcome, the primary outcome was stigma towards people with addiction. And somebody had developed a validated scale to measure that. So we use that tool so that we can have a true sense of whether or not we move the needle on that. And then we typically you have one primary outcome and then you can have many secondary outcomes. So we measured things like hope and optimism and, feelings of warmth towards people who were struggling with addiction. And then we measured those as our secondary outcomes, but our primary outcome is kind of what you hang your hat on. It's what you say, this is really what we intended this intervention to change. And because these are pre-registered, you can't change your story. So you put it out there on a website called clinicaltrials.gov and you say what you're going to measure. And then it's published for everyone to see before you run your trial. So people can't go back and change it and say, oh, it's not what I actually wanted it to do. I wanted it to do something else. And so, yes, we choose outcomes based on what the video is intended to shift. And then we try and use validated measures wherever we can to capture that in a way that's as scientific as possible.
Love that. Okay, here's another question. Do you think the shorter the video, the better impact it would have because of a short attention span of generations today? And
Yeah.
also, the stronger message could be sent if it's quick.
Absolutely. You are so right. And even in the last 5 years, since I've really been doing this work, the attention spans have gotten shorter and shorter. The videos on social media have gotten shorter and shorter. I have adult children who show each other videos, and it's like they show it to me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I would have to watch that 3 times to understand what just happened. But they show it to each other once, and because they're in the same generation, they get it immediately. So there is a way in which younger people are consuming messages where it's much more rapid. And I think their brains are different. I think they can just get the gist of it way more quickly than my generation. So the answer is, again, it depends on the audience. For older adults, maybe we want the videos to be not long. Personally, I find when things are really long, it really becomes a barrier to engagement. So I like shorter videos around the 2, even 1 minute. If we have made some 30-second videos and we're starting to experiment with those on Instagram to see if we can, access different populations with super short content. But so the answer is unclear. I don't really have an answer for that. I do agree with you that attention spans are getting shorter and that we will have to move towards even shorter content. And we're working on it as we speak here today.
Yeah, that's definitely something we on the Central Comms team in the Department of Medicine have been thinking about too, like
Yeah.
how to get that message, more brief, how to get to the, that hook right
Yeah.
away, how to make digestible, like entertainment value content that is still high quality. So yeah, it's a great question. Another question I'm feeling drawn to is okay, it says, is it fair to say that people in many parts of the world are more open to receiving health advice after the enormous pandemic that has affected so many?
Is it fair? I don't have data to prove that, but I would say anecdotally, I do see an openness to learning about health. And at the same time, I think the pandemic caused us all to be, for better or for worse, more online. So there's much more digital savviness in parts of the world where digital devices and things like webinars and social media were not so much used before the pandemic. And now I'm just thinking about South Africa because I spent a lot of time there. We're seeing a lot of people much more comfortable on their cell phones. Many more people have access to cell phones. They use it much more fluently. So I think those two things, the pandemic, as well as the access and the familiarity with digital devices, have led us to a situation in which you're right. I think people globally probably are more open to receiving health information, hopefully science-based. And I think one of the challenges for us is to help people distinguish between opinion-based and science-based health messages.
I love that. We're getting several questions about basically the how to, like how are you making these videos? So one of them is I'd love to watch more such videos and I'd like to try to make some of these myself. Where can I start? And I think that encompasses a number of other questions that we're receiving. So I think this is a topic on the mind of a good number of people in the room. How do I do this?
Okay, so if you want to see all the videos we've created, they're all posted on either the Stanford Medicine YouTube channel or the Global Health Media Innovation Lab. If you just search that, you should find it. In terms of how to, these are the ingredients you need. You need a topic that ideally is important to a lot of people because the power of these messages is their ability to scale broadly, right? So a topic that affects quite a number of people, enough that it would warrant you making a really scalable message. Then you need a story idea. So you need, I'm going to use a fish to convey this message about addiction stigma. And I think this is what's going to happen. And so once you have your narrative using that story graph that I showed you, then you need to find an animator. I have found that because animation, if you go, you can't even get to like anybody at Disney. I've tried, it doesn't work. Nobody answers your emails. And by the way, they charge like an insane amount of money per minute of animated video production. But there are a bunch of talented students at institutions around the world that are learning animation that would love to work with you and are very happy to earn a few $1,000s to do a project like this. And there are extremely talented professional animators in the global South who are able to work with you. Thank goodness we now have Zoom, who are able to collaborate with you at a distance. And all of the videos you saw today were created by a South African animator. And I've worked with him for years, and he, I think, likes these projects. And, they're relatively low lift for people that are doing this as a profession. One good place to find people and I'm not advertising, I have no conflict of interest. There are sort of websites. One of them is a website called Fiverr that I use sometimes where you can find animators and just check their, obviously their, what do you call it, their reviews, and check the number of projects they've worked on and look at their samples. And then you can often find somebody from the Global South who's put their talent up on that website, and there are others, not just that one. And then you can engage with them and say, would you be interested in working with me on this project? As for the soundtracks, music sites, open access music sites often will let you download the right track. You just have to sift through a lot of different tracks and find one that captures the emotion that you want your video to portray. And then if you have basic editing skills, you can edit those pieces together using iMovie or Camtasia or some software like that. If you have no editing skills whatsoever, go back to the website where all the talent comes and put in video editing services and see if you can find a student or a young person who's affordable who can help you edit that together. I hope that helps.
All great advice. Thank you. And sort of on a similar vein, I think we have some communicators in the room from the Department of Medicine and the School of Medicine. Greetings, all, who are curious about the composition of your comms team, Dr. Adams. So, what the question here is, what does your communications team consist of in terms of their roles and talent? What kind of background do they come from? Writers, animators, video producers, editors? I think we're curious about, like, are you like a one-woman show that is engaging these, other like kind of third party, global animators and, externally, or do you have a internal, in-house team that you're working with that helps you to accomplish these large projects?
Yeah. Okay. So again, that's not a simple answer. The Global Health Media Innovation Lab that I started in 2020, I work a lot with external supports, mostly because we don't have a lot of funding yet for the lab, but we are actively writing grants and all of that good stuff. So we have certain small sources of funding for the lab that allow us to then work with animators in the Global South, with teen musicians who can create a soundtrack for us sometimes, with editors if we need them. I actually know how to edit, so I usually edit myself. I'm also a bit of a control freak, which doesn't help, but I end up usually editing it together myself. And then the asset that I have is I have a great relationship with our communications teams at Stanford Medicine and in the Department of Medicine and in the Department of Pediatrics, where they will sometimes help to amplify, or they'll come to me with a project and say, we would like a mental health series. And then I get to lean on their amazing expertise at disseminating things broadly on social media. So that's an asset that is hard to come by. And I'm so lucky. And I don't know what the solution is if you don't have access to an institution with that kind of dissemination support. But in terms of the creation piece, you can actually do it on quite a lean basis if you are willing to really get in there and learn.
It's great. I think we have time for one more question here, and I think that question will be, what do you love most about your job?
Oh my God, so many things. I love I love when I can create a story that makes somebody feel something. Because I have come to learn that you can't change someone's mind unless you touch them in their heart. And so when I can create a story, it's not even a thing, it's like a story, it's, an idea. And when I can create that and put that into some format that actually moves people or makes them laugh, that there's no better feeling for me. I love being able to move people through stories. That's the best part of my job.
Oh my goodness, you're so incredibly inspiring. Dr. Maya Adam, thank you so much for coming and talking to us today. I wanted to answer one question in the chat. Yes, this this event will be recorded or has been recorded, and we will be, giving it a couple just, kind of minor edits and then distributing it through our YouTube channel, Stanford Department of Medicine. I think, we'll also send that link out directly to all the people who registered for the event, because I know there was a lot of interest worldwide. Some areas where maybe internet is, not as stable as in others, and they were really hoping to see this event today, and I would love to make that happen. So, so that will come out on our YouTube channel, and then also our Department of Medicine social media channels. This has been just incredible. Thank you everyone for your active participation in the chat. It has felt like such an incredible community today, and we'll hope to see you guys all soon. Thank you again, Dr. Adam.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for having me. Bye.
The preceding program is copyrighted by the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University. Please visit us at med.stanford.edu.